Everybody can hear me? Okay. Let's do the important part. Do I look smarter now? Okay, now let's do the next important part. Do I look smarter now? Looks matter. I want to talk to you today about livability in a way that meshes with the things that other people have said and seems a lot more superficial because how things look is largely on the surface. But I claim deeply, deeply matters because where we walk looks determines whether we want to walk there. How your shop looks determines whether I walk in. How a sidewalk looks determines whether I think it's safe to go there, whether I think it's possible to bike past there, whether I can get my stroller or my chair or my bundle buggy up onto it. How things look matters. I'd like to talk about livability in that context. There are two things I'm not going to do today. One of those is I'm not going to prescribe answers. I was invited to speak here today to participate in a conversation. I don't have a prescription for you. I just hope I can leave you with some niggling questions. I'm also not here to talk about public sculpture. I'm trained as a sculptor, and I have a love-hate relationship with public sculpture, as many of us do. But I'm not going to talk about it except to say this, that in this region, you could probably take all of the public sculpture that we have and stack it in this rotunda, and it would all fit. Now, I made that up. You can't quote me on it, but we all suspect it's probably true. What I want to talk about instead is that vast visual landscape that fills all the spaces in between those little dots of public sculpture. Because that's what Waterloo Region looks like. And that's what makes a space livable or not in terms of visuals, not the occasional punctuation mark of vastly debated public sculpture. Okay, so I went to high school at any rate, in a town called Perth. And if you look at it, it looks a lot like this everywhere. It is quaint and stolid and a wee bit rural. And I think you can tell that from how it looks. Here are the three most famous things about Perth, Ontario. Here are the only three famous things about Perth, Ontario. And I use the word famous entirely incorrectly. Perth was the site of the last fatal duel fought in Canada in 1833, and we're still talking about it. Perth was the home of the Mammoth cheese, a 22,000-pound cheddar manufactured for the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. And we're still talking about it. And Perth was the home of Big Ben and Ian Miller, World Championship equestrian team. There's a statue, and we're still talking about it, 1999-ish. If that doesn't reassure you that when I say Perth is quaint and stolid and a little rural, I mean it. There's no other evidence to present, but it looks like what it is. Vancouver, I'd pin as urban and hip and green. I was vacationing there last week. Whenever I go back to Vancouver, I look for a handful of botanical landmarks that say to me, I'm back. I look for bamboo, I look for holly, and I look for monkey puzzle trees. Three exotic things that can be found almost nowhere else in Canada. Tell me at a glance that I'm in Vancouver. How things look matters and identifies where we are. Magic page turn, because no one ever mistook St. John's, Newfoundland for Quebec City. They look completely different. Now, that'll do it. Visual decisions aren't neutral. Visual decisions aren't neutral. What a place looks like isn't just that piece of public sculpture, it's the bits in between, and we don't make those decisions consciously all the time, but how a place looks affects how we feel about going there. So here's what an alley looks like. We all know this. Here's what an alley looks like. And here's what an alley looks like decorated for Christmas. Our alleys look the way they do because of undecisions, default decisions we make about how things look. We don't decide about alleys, and they come out looking like this, and we then decide how we feel about going there or what we do there. But those aren't the only decisions that could be made about alleys. Alleys could look like this. Who spoke earlier about the danger of air conditioners? This is an alley in Singapore, and I believe every one of those lovely geometric sculptures is actually an air conditioner. This is an alley. This is an alley. This is an alley. And this is an alley. People made different undecisions about what these alleys looked like and created spaces that looked different as a result, characteristically different. And those spaces afford different kinds of activity and interactions as a result. You would much rather go for a stroll through this alley than the charmingly named first alley I showed you. It's in Vancouver, and it's called Blood Alley. There's a street sign that says Blood Alley. You've made a fundamental wrong decision as a city when you are stamping out a street sign that says Blood Alley. These are undoubtedly mistint paints picked up cheap or left over from some other project, slapped on whatever happened to be the backs of the buildings on this alley. And I'd still rather walk there than in Blood Alley. Visuals matter. How things look matters. People made different decisions about these apparently unimportant spaces in between the important spaces that changed the livability of their area. How things look changes how we use them, and how we use things changes how they look. So to pick another example to which we do not dedicate a huge amount of our mental resources, what's a bench for? I'm going to change it. You just got to get to it as fast as I can. So this is what a bench is for. And this is what a bench is for. This is definitely what a bench is for. But to some people, this is what a bench is for. And this is what a bench is for. And as a result of those things, sometimes we get benches that look like this. Truly attractive, welcoming rods of steel to try and preclude skateboarding or sleeping, or in fact, lounging with your boyfriend or sprawling to read a book. A less civic decision and a more individual decision. Here's another way that a bench can look. When a local community felt like there just weren't enough benches at that bus stop, and they expanded informally. I'd like to point out you also can't skateboard on that. My favorite benches, and I use the word favorite entirely inaccurately, are in the big atrium at the University of Waterloo Davis Centre. The dimly lit red things in the middle there are uncomfortable, slippery metal benches, and they are used to break up the graphically attractive matrix of metal cafe stools that you see there, sometimes called the mushrooms. And they are positioned so tightly, so close together, that it's incredibly socially uncomfortable to sit on any one of them. So no one sits on them. They are, in fact, removable, it turns out. And whenever an event is held in that atrium, they just unscrew all of those stools and benches and take them away. Because when you have people there in any quantity, that seating is so useless that you have to remove it. The seating is only there when there are no people to use it. Those are a couple of ways that we end up trying to control the look of a space, or to control the use of a space by controlling that. Can we and should we do that? I wanted to show you a couple of examples of ways that people, either civic institutions or individuals, alter spaces and the look of them and what it does to interaction. Because here is Seattle, a city that's come up a number of times today already as an example of livability on different dimensions. And embedded in the sidewalks in Seattle are bronze footprints. Not Walk of Fame kinds of footprints, but in fact more like Arthur Murray School of Dance footprints. And they have little arrows and instructions, and you can practice dance steps while you're waiting for the bus on the streets in Seattle. How things look. Chemainus, British Columbia, is about the same size as Perth, where I went to high school, and they made some assertive civic decisions about how they wanted their town to look. And the entire town has giant wall encompassing murals of ye olde touristy scenes, such as people might like to bus in and visit. And they do. Chemainus, British Columbia. The less formal, individually driven alternative is the most famous example of a street artist, Banksy, who does not wait for a city to make a decision and paint over a wall. He shows up in the middle of the night with a can of paint and a stencil. His work is extremely collectible now, except when it gets painted over. Another approach is Hundertwasser. An artist, an architect, built this apartment complex in Vienna, and he not only painted the exterior in lots of different ways, but believed in something he called the right of window. And what he'd like to promote in terms of the look of the space around us is that you, as a dweller in an apartment building, have a right to decorate the exterior of the building as far as you can reach outside your window with a paintbrush. That's the right of window. Now, I think it's valuable to notice that, in fact, that was written into the contract for residents in this apartment building when it was constructed. None of them have taken advantage of the right of window. They're all so pleased with and respectful of what Hundertwasser did with the building itself that they can't imagine altering it as individuals. An interesting conflict between what he hoped was going to liberate people to alter the look of their environment as individuals and an overall civic look. But in that most walkable of cities, New York, here's a change that's been happening within the last month. Somebody unknown is going out in the night with a stencil and paintbrush and painting compasses on the sidewalk just outside exits of the subway stations. I want you to look at this compass closely because it is an incredibly useful thing for improving the livability of Manhattan. It's showing you east, it's showing you west, it's showing you uptown and downtown. And when you come out of the subway completely turned around, and it happens to people who've lived there all of their lives, a quick glance down at these anonymously provided compasses gives you a hint of which direction it is you want to head next.